Okay, so this video is going to be a demonstration for how you might use Boolean variables to control action that doesn't happen to the whole game, but only when a certain thing happens or a certain condition is met in your game. For example, when a certain time has been reached, or when a certain score is gotten, you can do this. Or maybe when you hit the space bar, then fire a missile. But don't fire a missile before then, and don't check to see if the missile's intersecting anything, because there isn't a missile fired yet. So you can use Boolean variables as one tool to at least help you to write code that handles those specific situations. So we're going to do that together right now. The program I'm using is one that you should be familiar with. That is, I've been using throughout this series. It's Zargon and Boron, and I've already gone ahead and loaded a missile that you can see is on the screen right now. It shouldn't be there because I haven't fired a missile yet, so we'll work on that. And then after I do fire the missile, it should start moving across the screen. So right now there should be nothing on the screen but Zargon and Boron. We need to get rid of Boron because he's evil and he should not be in this universe, and we all, I think, agree on that. And so the missile that we're going to fire should be able to handle the situation for us. If not, there's going to be some pretty big trouble. Okay. So let's do a few things. I don't want that missile to be showing up right now. Why not? Well, because I haven't fired a missile. And I guess you could have it out there, but let's just say for this one, the missile doesn't show up until I hit the space bar. Okay, so for right now, it shouldn't be showing up. The reason why it is showing up is because down in my draw code, I said, computer, draw Zargon. Hey, computer, draw missile. Hey, computer, draw Boron. Well, I don't always want to have the missile being drawn. Okay, when do I want to have the missile being drawn? Well, whenever there's a missile, whenever a missile is in action, whenever I've hit the space bar. Okay, so we need some kind, but I don't want it to only show up when I'm hitting the space bar. I want the space bar to sort of be a instigator of activity, not I don't want to have it mashed down, I guess, or at least I guess you could, but not in this scenario. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a Boolean variable. Okay, and that Boolean variable is going to help us remember whether or not we've hit the space bar, right? Whether or not we have fired an actual missile. Because if we have, we're going to have missiles on the screen. We're going to have moving around, all this crazy stuff. So we're going to create a Boolean variable. Okay, and it is going to represent whether or not we have, whether or not we shot a missile at Boron. So I'm going to call it missile fired. How about that? Okay, Boolean missile fired. And when the game starts, we need to decide, is that value true or false? Have we fired a missile when the game starts? No, we haven't. Okay, so it's false. Okay, so the value of missile fired is false to begin with because we haven't fired one. Okay, and that gives us now a variable we can use to allow us to display missiles or not. Because when do I want to display a missile? What would the value of missile fired be when I do want the missile to show up? Because right now it shouldn't be there. Okay, so what we can do is we can say, okay, eventually we'll have it set up such that when I do hit the space bar, then the missile has been instigated, so the value of missile fired is true. But right now it's not true. Okay, so we're going to say this: if missile fired, okay, is true. If something happens which causes that value to become true, okay, then I do want missile, misspelled that, okay? Does that make sense? So if the value of missile fired ever becomes true, for whatever reason, then I would like to display it on the screen. But until that time, don't display it. So let's run that and see. Because right now it starts out as false. There's nothing to change it, so it doesn't ever show up on the screen. But the moment that something does change that value of missile fired to true, okay, for example, hitting the space bar, then the missile will start drawing. Okay, so let's go do that. Okay, so what I've done is up here in my update code, which is where all my non-graphic related code is. I actually have gonna have this activity happening. Now, you're probably using a keyboard or your body or something like that. I'm just gonna be using, a game controller. I'm just gonna be using the keyboard. And so you're welcome to, you may have used this before, you may not have, but here's the code which actually goes out there and checks the current state of the keyboard. In other words, what buttons are being pressed. And I'm using a variable called key state to remember the state of those. And you can actually ask a question using that variable to find out, hey, is this button being pressed? And so what this command, right, what this if statement does right after this is, hey, go check the state of that keyboard, and if there is a key being pressed down and that key is the space bar, then let's do something. And so we decided that, okay, the instigator of activity for this action is hitting the space bar. If a space bar is hit, what should happen? Well, start launching a missile across the screen. Okay, cool. Well, there's a series of commands that have to go for that to happen. But to start out, to begin with, one of the things that's going to have to happen is have the picture show up. What makes the picture show up? Well, we only show it when the value of, what is that again? When the value of missile fired is true. Well, currently it's false. So hopefully you're saying to yourself, well, look, can we just make it true? Sure we can. Okay, missile fired equals true. Boom. Okay, so hey, check the state of the keyboard 60 times a second. At any point in time, should they hit the space bar, then immediately missile fired equals true. And the only impact that'll have on the game is, whereas before when it was false, that code was not happening, it should be happening now. So we can test that out. The missile's not actually going to move around and shoot, but it will at least show up. All right, so we run this code, and right now Zargon is sitting there giving Boron the evil eye, and we have not hit the space bar yet, and so there is no missile. Well, I'm going to hit the space bar. You should be able to hear me hit it. Boom, and there is the missile. Okay, it's not moving, and it's not checking to see if it's colliding yet, but it is on the screen, so we know that that code worked. Okay, and that's a great step towards what we're trying to accomplish. So now, in addition to showing it, we also want a series of things. So now that we have fired a missile, now that the value of that variable is true, we have a few things that we want to happen. Okay, so let's go make those things happen. One of those is move the missile across the screen, you know, and then another is, hey, check to see if the rectangle of the missile ever intersects the rectangle of the boron. So if you haven't done the intersection tutorial, you're definitely going to want to go do that now. Okay, so all right, so let's do it. So you know how in the draw method we use the value of that Boolean variable to determine whether or not we wanted to display this code. That's going to be a really good model to follow, because we also want to use that same idea, that same logic up here in our update code, because there's some code we want to also happen, but only in the scenario where missile fired is true. Okay, and for example, we do want the missile to move around, but we can't do that in the draw method because that's not draw code. You know, in the draw method, we only have draw-related code, right? So we want other actions to happen, such as things moving across the screen, etc. Then it looks the exact same. Okay, so if missile fired equals true, and the only time that would ever happen would be if they hit the space bar. Okay, so hey, at any point in the program, should he or she hit the space bar, immediately change the value of missile fired equal to be true. It was false. And then, hey, by the way, if missile fired ever is true, that means we want to fire a missile. Okay, so I think the draw code is already displaying the missile on the screen, but it's not moving around. Okay, so we want to move. Okay, well, just like Zargon and Boron, the missile also has its own set of coordinates. Okay, and I called those mx and my for missile x and missile y. It's the coordinates of that, and those numbers just have it situated so it's right by Zargon's head. Okay, but we're going to have that move in the horizontal direction. So you have to think to yourself, which coordinate would be changing, the up and down or the left and right? And is that the x or is that the y? And so we're going to change the value of the x value to go to the right. So mx equals mx, and we're going to increase to go to the right, plus some value, 2. We're going to move the missile 2 pixels to the right. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, la-da-da-da-da, boom. And yeah, so it looks good. Now we have no code that handles the hitting of Boron, but we have code which moves my guy across the screen. Okay, so we're going to do that. So is there anything else we want to happen once he's hit the space bar, we want the missile to move across the screen, and we want some other things to happen too. Hey, while it's moving across the screen, check what? Check to see if what? Check to see if it's hitting boron. Okay, cool. Well, if you've done the intersection code already, and if you haven't, please go do that tutorial. But let's do that. So we've got a hey, oops. If the missile rectangle intersects boron rectangle, okay. And what's crazy is you have this if inside of this if, because I don't want this to happen. There's no point in checking this if missile fires false, right? And so it's called an embedded if. Pretty cool. And so, hey, as long as missile fires true, so if she has already hit the space bar, then she has fired a missile. So hey, start moving that missile across the screen and continuously check to see if that missile has intersected boron. Okay, and if it has, we should get some points. I would say score equals score plus 1,000. Heck yeah. And score, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so we give ourselves 1,000 points for intersecting boron. Let's run that and see if we in fact can get 1,000 points for hitting, boom, space, and boom, we got 62,000 points. And you're saying to yourself, what? We're supposed to just have 1,000. Well, why did we get 62,000? Well, think about that. 60 times a second. The missile was going right through boron's body. Better code would be, once you detect the intersection, maybe kill boron, have him move off the screen, or have the missile move or go back to the original place or something like that, so it's not continuously hitting him. But that would be something you can work on later on. Okay, so why don't we do this? Once the there are going to be some times where the missile should turn off. Okay, so if you're out west and you shoot a gun in the air, and the bullet's eventually going to come back and hit the ground. Okay, so the whole activity of your gun shooting is now over. Okay, well, there's a couple scenarios where our missiles would be over. One is you hit your target, and the other is you went, well, in this game, you could say if you went off the screen or if it went past some certain point or something like that. So we could certainly have some code in there which handles what should I do when the missile gets to a certain point. Okay, one thing I think we could do is, hey, if the missile hits boron, I think we can go ahead and turn the missile off. Okay, well, the way to turn it off is we're going to use that Boolean variable again. Because remember, if missile fired is true, we have fired a missile and a bullet is in existence. Please do all the bullet-related code, right? And then when it's accomplished this task, to turn all that off, to keep it from happening, you could just make that value false. So missile fired becomes false. So in this scenario, if we run this now, it is going to, the picture should go away once it hits boron. So let's see if that actually happens. We hit the space bar, and as soon as it hits boron, the missile goes away. Yep, you got it. All right, so, and it also handled, hey, I didn't get 62,000 points, I got 1,000 because we turned the missile off. Right? Wasn't checking anymore to see if there was an intersection because there wasn't a missile in existence. So that is a very powerful command. Is there another time where the missile would turn off? Okay. Now I know in our scenario right here, it's not mathematically possible for the missile to miss boron, but let's say that it was. You could actually say something like if mx is greater than some value, I think the edge of the screen is like 800 or something like that, whatever it is. So you could actually say, hey, if the coordinate ever goes off the screen or something like that, then just turn it off. You could do something like that. But in our game right here, it's not possible that it misses him because the math doesn't allow it to. So I hit the space bar and we come up and boom. So that is a way to turn activity on and turn activity off based on conditions in your game and based on actions in your game. So I hope you can use that to accomplish some of the things you're trying to accomplish. Excellent.